What in the world is happening off the coast of Anna Maria Island near the coast of Florida? Not only is there sonoluminescence happening, but check this out. There are literally waves in the patterns of squares. This is a person right there, and I've never seen anything like this. It is quite bizarre, and I don't think I agree with what the mainstream is saying. Because the mainstream simply says that square waves, also known as cross seas, are caused by the meeting of two sets of ocean waves from different weather systems. Well, maybe I would believe that if there weren't also crazy square patterns in the clouds in that same area, and also the sonoluminescence going on at the same time. But when you take a closer look, you realize that simple sound frequency can change the patterns of water, even to patterns that seem to have 90-degree square angles. And certain frequencies just happen to look exactly like those clouds and waves. And when you see that certain frequencies can cause certain patterns, and certain frequencies look just like those water patterns at Anna Maria Island, and you also see that certain frequencies can generate light. So maybe what's going on at Anna Maria Island isn't what they're telling us. Maybe they're throwing some frequencies out into the atmosphere. Frequencies that are causing water to respond a certain way. Frequencies that are causing clouds to respond a certain way.
You know, they were talking about climate change yesterday, and now we're learning that scientists and researchers are looking at how to change the weather on purpose. That's right. Lasers now could one day manipulate rain and lightning. CBS This Morning contributor Michio Kaku is a physics professor at City College of New York. Professor, nice to see you. Extraordinary seeing Al Gore and Bill Clinton there together with Charlie, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, they did not get into this discussion, though. But it is fascinating. I mean, lasers, really, to change the weather?
That's right. Well, as Mark Twain once famously said, everyone complains about the weather, but no one ever does anything about it. Well, instead of doing a rain dance, we physicists are firing trillion-watt lasers into the sky to actually precipitate rain clouds and actually bring down lightning bolts. This is potentially a game changer.
But this is experimental.
It's experimental. However, in the laboratory so far it works. When you have water vapor and you have dust particles or ice crystals, you can precipitate rain. It condenses around the seeds. These seeds can also be created by laser beams. By firing trillion-watt lasers, you rip apart the electrons, creating what are called ions, and these ions act like seeds, like dust particles, bringing down rain and even lightning.
Go ahead.
Well, this fascinates me in part because, too, I remember reading the stories that China had used this during the Olympics, that the USSR had used this after Chernobyl to create rain clouds. I mean, did those really work then? We have some of these capabilities now?
Inconclusive. Even in the 60s, the CIA used this to bring down monsoons during the Vietnam War, to wash out the Viet Cong. Governments have been playing with this thing.
Alleged to.
Alleged to, right.
Yeah.
Now, we realize that for decades now, these governments have been alleged to have experimented with weather control, but nothing conclusive. This time we're bringing in the laws of physics rather than simply waving our hands and uttering mumbo-jumbo. We're actually using trillion-watt lasers now. And in the laboratory, sure enough, they precipitate rain out of water vapor. Sure enough, you can actually bring down electricity down the beam.
So what does it mean for drought areas that need to have rain for crops, and if they don't have them, there's the consequences of famine?
Well, the bad news is if it's a clear blue sky, it's not going to do anything at all, because it only takes water vapor that's already in the air and condenses it. However, for floods, for agriculture, farmers, for people planning wedding parties, football games, you name it, outdoor events and agriculture and flooding and even hurricanes, all of them could be subject to weather modification.
Incredibly interesting, Professor Michio Kaku. Thank you so much.
Is it going to rain in Dubai today? Just so I know. I have to drive back from Abu Dhabi to Dubai.
No.
It's not raining. It's a sunny day.
The UAE government invested more than $20 million in research to start a process called cloud seeding. The UAE performs around 1,000 hours of cloud seeding a year, and it's all controlled by this building in the National Center of Meteorology in Abu Dhabi, where they track the whole process. We met with a cloud seeding expert to explain how the seeding process works.
We wait the forecast. When we have a good chance for a cloud, we send the aircraft to that location. It go under the cloud. In the first stage of the cloud, there is good updraft at that time, start to release all the salt, and with the good updraft, of course, it will go inside the cloud. The droplets will become bigger and start to rain.
The center manufactures a salt substance that helps enhance rainfall. They put them in what they call flares.
Lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
Project Cirrus is the first official attempt to modify a hurricane. It was run by General Electric with the support of the U.S. military. The official theory was that by changing the temperature outside the eye wall of a hurricane, which they did by seeding the clouds with various compounds such as silver iodide, a decrease in strong winds will result. On October 13, 1947, Project Cirrus targeted a hurricane heading out to sea. Approximately 180 pounds of dry ice was dropped into the clouds. The crew then reported a pronounced modification of the cloud deck, and the hurricane abruptly changed direction and made landfall near Savannah, Georgia. The public blamed the government. Irving Langmuir, who pioneered General Electric's atmospheric research department and admitted that the project was about learning how to weaponize the weather, also claimed the reversal of the hurricane had been caused by Project Cirrus. But the government denied it for 12 years. After a short delay, the project officially continued, and in 1965, Project Storm Fury had targeted Hurricane Betsy for seeding. On that day, the storm immediately changed direction and made landfall in southern Florida. Congress blamed it on Project Storm Fury, but the government claimed that the hurricane shifted before they ever had a chance to seed it. And after 2 months of congressional hearings, the project was allowed to continue. During the Vietnam War, weather modification was weaponized in Operation Popeye. And as a result, starting in October of 1978, an international treaty now prohibits the military use of weather modification. In 1997, U.S. Defense Secretary William Cohen said that we have enemies capable of altering the climate and setting off earthquakes and volcanoes remotely through the use of electromagnetic waves. And so controlling the weather seems to be a very real thing. And while the media lies to you, the government has placed gag orders on employees of the National Weather Service, who have sought legal counsel to reverse these illegal gag orders. And they no longer need to seed the clouds. Chemtrails, or as John Brennan of the CIA calls it, stratospheric aerosol injection, allows these black government projects the ability to put whatever they want into the skies. And Haarp has the ability to change the temperature within the ionosphere. In congressional hearings, it was made known that Haarp was a successful operation of controlling the ionosphere with ultra-high-powered radio frequency, and that the Air Force and DARPA went on to develop their own versions.
The Air Force has gotten great value out of Haarp in the past. We took it over from the Navy and managed it and actually did a number of experiment campaigns up there and have finished our work that we're interested in doing up there. We've moving on to other ways of managing the ionosphere, which the Haarp was really designed to do, was to inject energy into the ionosphere to be able to actually control it. But that work has been completed.
Frequency transmission manipulation of hurricanes is one of hundreds of patents on weather control. With conductive particles added to the storm, radio frequencies from multiple locations can steer a hurricane. According to geoengineeringwatch.org, this happened with Hurricane Ian.
This is Hurricane Ian, passing near the NextRad transmission facility in Key West, Florida. When the transmission facilities are fully energized, they have a repelling effect on any air mass that has been saturated with electrically conductive climate engineering elements. As Hurricane Ian is allowed to make landfall, the frequency transmission facility in Melbourne, Florida is fully engaged. This effectively slows Ian's migration inland. The transmissions can diminish precipitation in some regions while augmenting it in others.
Reporting for InfoWars.
One of the significant elements of weather warfare is the plausible deniability angle to it. You can't really attribute it to anyone at all because you don't know if it's just the weather or if it's some more sinister military application that you're being subjected to.
If you can trigger nature to do the work for you, you can raise covert wars, which our country and many others are famous for, and yet have the deniability that goes along with it.
Weather experts from NOAA and from the National Weather Service can't explain why the jet stream anomaly occurred. Perhaps it's all just a part of Mother Nature's unpredictable ebbs and flows. Still, it's no coincidence that the United States began building its own mysterious array of antennas in February 1992. They are located in Gakona, Alaska. The project is called Haarp.
Haarp is the High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Project, originally a joint effort of the Air Force and Navy in cooperation with a number of academic institutions.
It is today the world's largest radio broadcasting station, but it's not designed to broadcast for human ears. It uses a unique patented ability to focus the energy coming out of the antenna field and injects that energy into a spot at the very top of the atmosphere in a region called the ionosphere.
Haarp is comprised of 180 antennas, approximately 72 feet tall, linked together to function as one giant steerable antenna. Steerable because it can aim millions of watts of ELF waves into one tiny patch of the atmosphere.
The amount of energy we're talking about here is 3.6 million watts. To give you an idea of what that is, the largest legal AM radio station in North America is 50,000 watts. Haarp is 72,000 50,000 watt radio stations injecting their entire output into a spot that's about 12 miles across by about 2.5 miles deep by about 90 miles up.
This is where Haarp is pointing. It's an area located roughly 300 miles from Anchorage. The U.S. military says Haarp is merely being used to study the physical and electrical properties and behavior of the ionosphere for both civilian and defense purposes. But another theory is surfaced. The intense energy being beamed into the sky by Haarp is actually heating up the atmosphere, causing weather changes.
Haarp is being used for weather modification. The military's own record proves it. They've admitted it within their own documents, and yet they still deny it to the public.
Dr. Brooks Agnew has researched ELF wave technology for the past 30 years and is convinced Haarp's effect on the ionosphere does alter the weather.
Haarp couldn't affect the jet stream directly, but indirectly it could, because if you push the ionosphere out into space, then the stratosphere just under the ionosphere has to move to fill in that gap. When it moves, it could pull the jet stream with it, thus rerouting it hundreds of miles, changing the way water moves through our atmosphere. Exactly the same thing. It ionizes the particles, pushes them out into space.
Haarp is one of several ELF wave transmitters located all over the globe. The United States owns and operates 3 of them, one in Gakona, Alaska, another in Fairbanks, Alaska, and one in Arecibo, Puerto Rico. Russia has one in Vasilursky near Nizhny Novgorod, and the European Union has one near Tromsø in Norway. Working in tandem, these transmitters could potentially alter the weather anywhere in the world, changing the jet stream's course entirely, triggering massive rainstorms or droughts. Even hurricane steering would be possible by heating up the atmosphere and building up high-pressure domes that could deflect or change the course of hurricanes. The U.S. government is firm in its position that Haarp is just an atmospheric research facility. But is it more than coincidence that since going online, some experts have reported strange weather anomalies, including massive floods, hurricanes, and earthquakes?
All right, everyone, welcome back. We are waiting the arrival of major Category 4 Hurricane Helene. This thing is an absolute monster. But take a look at this anomaly that's shooting down almost to where we're going to see landfall. It's very interesting. I'm curious to see if this thing actually lands right on top of where we think landfall is going to be. Now, there's something else kind of shooting out here underneath this layer of moisture over the southeast. It looks like it's coming from either northern Florida or a radar tower in southern Georgia. But the main one right here, look at this big beam that shoots down right to about here. That's where we're expecting landfall, give or take. Now, something even more interesting I want to show you on a more detailed chart. All right, I'll show you once here and then we'll zoom in, but take a look. It's coming from up in this area and it shoots down right to about here where we're expecting landfall. I'll move forward and you'll pretty much see it right away. There it is now. Boom, right here. Okay, so now we're going to zoom in and see exactly where this thing points to, because that is not your normal beam that you see coming from these radar. It's definitely coming from the state of Georgia, probably underneath this mess here. It's coming this way and there's a cross of that other beam either coming from northern Florida or southern Georgia. All right, this is about as close as we're going to get. We're going to see one anomaly over here in the western panhandle, and then we're going to look for that shot we were just looking at. We move one frame, boom, here's those weird waves that come off. We see this a lot underneath heavy systems, especially when they're approaching the coastlines. Now we're going to look for our beam here. We're going to see it pretty well. It's right about there. So this is pretty odd. I want to know what's going on here, and there's our cross beam, again, looking like it's coming from Florida itself, so it's coming up into this direction. This one is certainly coming down from Georgia into Florida, almost to where we're seeing landfall. If we backtrack a little bit, you can see here the momentum wants to bring this storm up and then kind of right into this area here. Maybe a little north, but that's what we're seeing. But take a look at these anomalies every couple frames, specifically that one we are looking at. There's another big one right there. It's kind of a sweeper. It's got multiple beams and it sweeps left to right. And now watch as we approach. You're going to see a bunch of little ones, and then we're going to see our landfall beam. That's the only thing I can think of naming it right now. There it is. Boom, right there. So let's see how close this actually gets to where landfall takes place. Again, not something you really want to share on TikTok or anywhere else but X, because you'll just get straight up attacked. At least on X we can have some conversations about things. Now this looks very odd. Let me know your thoughts. I'll talk to you all very soon. Bye-bye.
Do so. Could you tell us about some of your recent discussions, conversations, briefings that you've had with political leaders from the states in question that have asked you what you think? First of all, what did they specifically ask you, if you can tell us, and how did they respond to your answers?
Yes, Colonel McGregor, I had an hour conference call yesterday with the representatives and senators from the Carolinas, and we presented the data to them to answer their questions about how this manipulation occurs. They realized this was not a natural event. They're trying to digest the fact that their states were literally under assault from weather modification operations that are clearly connected with DoD operations, and we can speculate again on the agendas and objectives being carried out, but the fact that the storm was manipulated is absolutely inarguable. We know that technology to stop these rotations from even occurring has existed for decades with the manipulation of atmospheric pressure zones. Haarp in Alaska is one example many people are familiar with. That's an ionosphere heater. That's a weapon of mass destruction, period. It can cause an electrical chain reaction in the ionosphere, which heats it to extraordinarily high temperatures, which causes the atmosphere to bulge up and down. The downward push creates a high pressure dome that can steer the jet stream. And the same type of manipulation can create low pressure zones. And when they have this type of power over the climate system, they can make or break these storms anytime they want. And again, what we see now is storms kept weaker as they're over the ocean because they're harder to steer until they reach the land-based network of transmitters. And then we have, Colonel McGregor, rapid intensification. You've heard that term probably a lot lately because that's how they manipulate these storms. And again, we have Acapulco last October being the extreme example of rapid intensification. An insignificant low pressure system developed into the strongest Cat 5 hurricane to ever hit that part of the world in less than 24 hours, laid waste to Acapulco. And by the way, Hurricane John, which just hit Acapulco again as Hurricane Helene was wreaking havoc in the Carolinas. Not many people know that. So Acapulco just got dealt another blow. So again, how many agendas and objectives are being carried out when we know they can manipulate these storms, when we know they can make or break them anytime they want? And again, I bring up the oil infrastructure in the Gulf of Mexico that seems to magically miss any sort of damaging storm again and again and again, while the storms wreak havoc inland and on shorelines. It's not a coincidence. They have that much sway over the storm. So again, I'm just pointing out there's many, many layers. It's not just one objective being carried out. And we can speculate about all those objectives and agendas, but the bottom line is the storm is being steered, period. We're recording the frequency transmission energizing that has a repelling effect on the storm. That's what this is the basis of how they steer that storm. The frequency transmissions repel the air mass that's saturated with electrically conductive particulates, and that's exactly what's happening. And so again, there's no question this is going on, and as we discussed off the air, Greg, I'm communicating with congressional representatives from the Carolinas, had a long conference call this week, about an hour long. I presented data to them. They're on board. They're livid. They're shocked. They're in a state of angst over this occurring. And we're sending printed materials, geoengineeringwatch.org printed materials, which are the most effective key to the door. We pass those on our website for less than our cost of producing and shipping. But we give them to, of course, any type of governmental official or agency, and we send them at our cost to them. And a huge box of these materials have already been sent to the congressional representatives from Carolina.
Was Hurricane Helene's path and behavior just the result of natural processes and climate patterns, or was it manipulated? The circular blue flashes seen in this video are frequency transmissions from the NexRad network of transmitter installations. All available science evidence makes clear that atmospheric frequency transmissions can and do have a repelling effect on air masses, especially if and when the air masses have been seeded with electrically conductive nanoparticles. The brighter the blue flash from a frequency transmission installation, the more pronounced and powerful the repelling effect on any air mass or storm in the vicinity will be. Where there are no blue flashes, there is no transmission, thus no repelling effect, thus no resistance for a migrating storm. Translation: a migrating storm will be hindered from moving toward frequency transmissions and will easily migrate in a direction with no transmissions. So again, I ask, was Hurricane Helene's path and behavior just an act of nature, or was it engineered?
You decide.